Mary Beth Wiley. I found this quote about LRH policy. We own a tremendous amount of property. We own a tremendous amount of material and so forth. And it keeps growing. But that's not important. When buildings get important to us, for God's sake, some of you born revolutionists, will you please blow up central headquarters? Don't get interested in real estate. Don't get interested in the masses of buildings because that's not important. The Genus of Scientology, Anatomy of the Human Mind Congress, 31 December 1960. My question is, how do current practicing Scientologists following the word of LRH justify ideal orgs when it is the absolute opposite of what LRH states in his policy? Also, when LRH asked the born revisionists to blow up central headquarters, does that go against the policy of not saying anything against the leaders of Scientology if it is an actual policy? Thanks for the question, Mary Beth. There's a lot of different ways I could address this question. I'm just going to throw a couple things out here. First off, it doesn't really matter what Hubbard says or wrote anymore. If David Miscavige contradicts L. Ron Hubbard in some fashion from the stage or in a one-on-one conversation or addressing an organization, it doesn't matter. David Miscavige's word is senior to anything L. Ron Hubbard said or wrote at this point. Scientologists would not tell you that. They wouldn't describe it that way, or even they don't think that that's how they perceive David Miscavige's orders and directions, but that is, empirically, that's how it works. And you bringing up this quote is just one of many, many, many examples of how David Miscavige has contradicted L. Ron Hubbard's directions blatantly. I mean, just wide open. You just couldn't be more blatant in taking something Hubbard wrote and just going, we're not doing that. We're doing this. David Miscavige sold the whole idea of ideal orgs with hours of briefings at all different levels of Scientology. And he wasn't asking anybody's permission, by the way, when he was doing this. He was briefing them that this is what we're doing. So his word is law in Scientology, and if, as I've gone over in earlier episodes, if you contradict or come up against or in any way question what David Miscavige is doing, all of Scientology is going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. He is the senior authority of Scientology, and let's not forget, he's alive. L. Ron Hubbard is dead and has been for decades. So yeah, sure, it's nice that Hubbard wrote that, but here's one way Scientologists could justify this. If you were to sit them down and show them this policy and say, what gives? They would tell you something like, well, yeah, but that was in 1960. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard then went on to, St. Hill and build Clearwater and the Big Blue complex and all the buildings for the Sea Org after that. In fact, the Sea Org itself came into being after that. So clearly, L. Ron Hubbard wanted expansion of Scientology, and he wanted it to grow. And so we have to pay attention to these buildings, and we have to spend all these millions of dollars to make Scientology's public image an accurate reflection of the quality and miracle of Scientology's technology. We can't have folding chairs and folding tables and ratty carpet and peeling paint coming off the walls and no toilet paper and sinks that don't really work all the time. That doesn't reflect the brilliance of L. Ron Hubbard or the brilliance of Scientology. We need to do this. Okay? So, and they're not entirely, when you're in the Scientology mindset, you kind of go, well, that really makes a lot of sense. What doesn't make sense, of course, as with everything in Scientology, is not that every single idea of Scientology doesn't make sense. It's that they take it to this extreme. They just go as far as they possibly can with this stuff. So you end up buying these buildings that are people are swimming in them because the staff aren't manned up. The fields are very tiny. There's not a lot of public there. So they're just going crazy with this thing. And that is Miscavige, adding to this idea. But what I just described to you was part of the sales pitch of why ideal orgs were necessary. Now, of course, Miscavige didn't pull out this policy letter and go, well, here's what Hubbard said, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. He just ignored that altogether. He just didn't even pay any attention to that policy. I had not actually remembered that policy myself as a Sea Org member when Miscavige was talking about the Ideal Org program and briefing on it. I got sold immediately. I thought this was an amazingly good idea. And for a number of reasons, other reasons Miscavige laid out. And that didn't occur to me to remember this relatively obscure tape, this line from this lecture from 1960. It was when Debbie Cook's email came out in New Year's 2012 that I went, oh, because she quoted that policy in her very lengthy email about all the reasons why David Miscavige was totally off the rails and was driving Scientology right over a cliff. And this was one of the points that she made. She said Hubbard said not to do this. And when I saw that quoted and what she had to say about it, I went, yeah, she's right. Hubbard didn't say to do this and take this to the nth degree and go crazy with buildings, And I had seen the shift from concentrating on services and concentrating on getting people up the bridge and concentrating on helping people. I had seen it shift over the years that I was in the Sea Org to money, 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 money. And I just went, wow, So that quote made even more sense to me in 2012 than it would have in 2004 when I first heard about ideal orgs and Miscavige was first talking about them. I would have poo-pooed that reference, probably pretty similarly to how I gave you a rationalization of what a Scientologist would say earlier, a few minutes ago. So I had to live through and see how this ideal org program was rolling out to see how ridiculous it was and how what a con it was to get, oh yeah, that does contradict Hubbard, and so Hubbard wouldn't be doing this, and so maybe we shouldn't be doing this. So anyway, that is, like I said, that's just one of many examples. There are so many, well, there's really only a couple, but there's a lot to say about them, so I can't get into all the psychological mechanisms I've learned over the last 5 years about why people go along with this kind of thing, these contradictory ideas. I mean, the cognitive dissonance is one of the mechanisms, right? You have this policy here, but you have David Miscavige here. These things contradict. They have to somehow figure out the cognitive dissonance, the noise that these conflicting ideas create. They got to somehow sort that out for themselves, and generally speaking, they're going to sort it out in the direction of the person who is alive, who's running things right now and telling them this is how it is and what we need to do. They're going to tend to go in that direction rather than go in the direction of, well, wait a minute, Hubbard said this and that does, And so that's what most Scientologists did that. A few Scientologists sorted out their cognitive dissonance by going, oh yeah, this Miscavige is full of shit. We're going to get out of here. And a lot of people left. So kind of what you're seeing with Scientology now is a winnowing. They're pulling all those people who kind of would understand and would read, understand, and agree with L. Ron Hubbard's take on things, look at what Miscavige has done or is doing, and they just go, ugh, this guy's for the birds, and they leave. And that's why independent Scientology exists, and that's why the church's membership has crashed as hard as it has. So what you have now in Scientology is really these hardcore Miscavige followers, or people, like I've mentioned before, who can't leave, second gens, like the kids of these people, or spouses or business partners of these people, these hardcore fanatical believers who can't say, they have to stay under the radar. They can't say, yeah, Miscavige is full of shit and I'm leaving, because then their connection will be severed and they'll lose their family or their spouse or their business or whatever. So that's kind of how I see things, at least. And I hope that gives, everything I just said there gives some explanation for how it is that existing Scientologists in this day now reconcile or can reconcile completely contrary ideas. And there's lots of other mechanisms at play here. I was just reading about the Milgram experiments, which is not the Stanford prison experiment. The Milgram thing is a different thing, and And what that has to do with is people's response to authority. Just the fact that an authority is telling you to do something, 3 out of 4 people are going to do it. So there's also just that. There's not a lot of thinking involved. They're just, oh, here's an authority person. He's telling me what to do. I'm going to go do it because that's what he said to do. I mean, sometimes it's just that unthinking. So, that's kind of how that all goes.